Well, hello and welcome. Joining us tonight is a man who spent 3 seasons in the Sky Blue after being an inaugural squad member in Season 1. That followed a very varied career which took him to England, Scotland, Germany and Switzerland. He has also travelled the world as a broadcaster, having spent time presenting and reporting for SBS's The World Game. Now he's into coaching, and he is, of course, David Zdrilic. Welcome, David. How are you doing? Where are you right now?
Hey, mate. Good to see you. Yeah, I'm in Chicago right now. I'm in my apartment here, and yeah, the weather here is getting a lot better, so it's actually quite nice right now.
And what exactly is it you're doing? Tell us who you're working for and what sort of role are you in at the moment?
So I'm at Chicago Fire in the MLS. I'm an assistant coach here, and because of the whole situation, which has affected the world, the whole COVID situation, we were in lockdown for almost 3 months. Now the restrictions have been easing, so we went from individual training a couple of weeks ago to small group training, and now we're in full team training with obvious protocols around it, but we're able to train normally on the field, which is great. So for us here in the MLS, we will have a tournament which will kick off the season. That's happening in Florida. They've got a Wide World of Sports complex in Disneyland down there in Orlando. So we'll all be flying, all the teams will be flying down there next week. And then in a couple of weeks, we'll be starting there, and we'll basically be having 3 tournament games each in separate groups. And those tournament games will double up as an actual tournament where the winner of the tournament will have a Champions League spot. But those 3 group games will also count towards the league, which will then keep progressing after the tournament's finished. So obviously those games are going to have a lot of meaning.
And this isn't your first coaching gig, though, is it? Obviously, you spent a little bit of time at Sydney FC when you first were starting up as a coach, and then onto Leipzig. What were those 2 experiences like?
Well, it was every experience is different, but look, when you look at a traditional coaching journey, mine is definitely not that, for varying reasons. I mean, I started actually at Sydney United when I finished playing as a player coach. So I finished at Sydney FC and then went to Sydney United, and after Ante Milicic was player coach, he moved on. I then retired, became player coach, and that was my first experience, semi-professional environment. So that was the first part of it. But also, as I finished playing, I got into the media side of it. As you know, we also worked together in the media side of it. So that sort of combined with the coaching was where my post-playing career took me. And yes, I did want to coach, but at the same time, the media career sort of just fell into a direction where I was getting quite good roles. Obviously, in terms of the financial side of it, it was providing more opportunity than the coaching side of it. So I was trying to do both, but the media career sort of jumped ahead very quickly. But at the same time, I wanted to learn more about coaching. I just wasn't able to do it in the same degree as others who jumped full on. And obviously, there weren't many spots available in Australia, still aren't. So that was sort of where it took off. Funny enough, Bimby, current Sydney FC coach, started his coaching career as a youth team coach at Sydney FC. And we were talking about doing that as well together. But the time investment of doing that and doing a media career was quite difficult to manage both of them at the start. So, my career sort of took me to learning everything about coaching and football through the tactical side by being an analyst, and learning, European football, all the Champions League and all the tactical evolution from a different angle. And I think now, in hindsight, it's been a great experience. And I'm really glad that I did it that way, because I really looked at it from a different perspective in not just focusing on the tactical side from my own team, but looking at what is this team doing? What is this team doing? How are they? And I think that gave me a better overview of actually what's going on the field, not just from me trying to have my own philosophy and how is it matching up against someone else, but watching how everybody plays different philosophies. And I think that that was beneficial. So yeah, then the second phase was actually then going to Sydney FC and working with firstly Robbie Stanton, who helped me a lot, and he had a different view of looking at football, but very passionate. And he's obviously now, as you guys are well aware, very passionate assistant coach under Bimby there. So that kind of different dynamic, different way of thinking, all marrying up with my thoughts and putting it all together was great experience. Then I took over the 20s for a short time before making the jump over to Leipzig. And I think the whole experience there with Rob, and then obviously connected with Arnie, Graham Arnold, and Bimby and the guys, all that working together in the same close environment, basically gave me that next shot in the arm where I was like, geez, there's just, even in that 10 years or whatever it was when I was working in TV and analysing football, coaching had jumped, had evolved rapidly. And I saw that. And then on a study trip or a visit to Leipzig, where my old coach, Ralph Rangnick, was running the whole Red Bull network. He was sporting director there at the time. I spent 3 weeks there at Leipzig. And then when I went there, I saw, wow, this is just another level altogether. This was just, and it's the coaching with the mentoring, with the scouting network, with the whole Red Bull network, the way that it all ran together, the way the youth academy filters into the first team, all the mechanics behind the coaching, behind the whole network was just something that you can't experience here in Australia or in many places around the world, because you've got big networks around the world, like the City Group. They have their clubs and all that, but they don't have such a integrated philosophy behind them. I think Red Bull's the only entity that has a philosophy running through the whole veins of the network, and in such a integrated way. So that was very obvious to me when I went there, and that's why even when I went back to Sydney FC and brought some of that methodology back with Robbie Stanton and myself and trying to integrate it, having some information and implementing it was okay, but going there and spending 3 years and really understanding how this philosophy works was a totally different experience, a totally different level of learning and understanding for me.
But you actually started your career, I think, with St George before you went on to Sydney United. But who were you sort of playing with, and when was that happening at Sydney United? The likes of Arnie, was he there at the time? Tony Popovic, Jelko Kalac?
Yeah, so Arnie was, funny enough, that was a little bit before my time when I arrived there, but Arnie was amongst that group that I used to watch. And being born of Croatian immigrants, and so second generation, and then being born in Australia, but at that time there were the Sydney Croatians, the Marconis, the Sydney Olympics. So you had the Croatian, Greeks, Italians, and all these different cultures together. And obviously I was following Sydney United, Sydney Croatia back then, and Arnie was one of the guys playing. So that was like, that was my team, and that was where a lot of my childhood was spent. So that was just a fantastic time. So then for me, growing up, I wasn't, a lot of Croatian parents, they would throw their sons especially into football, into Sydney Croatia, or and that was the dream. Whereas my family my father pushed me through school, so I didn't get all that kind of playing through the youth ranks, like like the Moric's, the Milicics, the Popovic's, the Kalats, who all went through that cycle and AIS and all of this stuff. So I didn't get any of that. I came at the back end and sort of through St. George, which wasn't to become a professional. It was just like I was able to do it and study at the same time. And then the football career just happened after having a trial at Sydney United, and just exploded into 4 years of unbelievable success for me personally, because I was actually then living a dream that I never thought would happen. And then I was playing with the likes of Palac, Popovic, all these, Milicic, all these kind of guys. Marasic, whoever remembers him, fantastic player. So there's so many good players, talented players at that time. And that's where I learned the culture, my culture, Croatian culture, mixed with being born in Australia and those cultures merging, which is probably why, there's all this debate about youth development, because what I remember is those cultures, that strong Croatian culture, whether it be Croatian, Italian, Greek, that culture merged with our Australian mentality was something that made us very, very strong and gave us that pathway to become not only players and play at a high level. And, many players came through Sydney United and other clubs to become Socceroos and play overseas. But also now you're seeing a lot of those guys in being, whether it be in media or coaching, very prominent figures.
Your dad wanted you to be a lawyer, I remember you said.
Yeah, so so I was studying law and then playing at St. George, and obviously the law was the number one. So the St. George was like, shouldn't get in the way with that. And then the Sydney United happened, and it was similar. I had to do, so I was basically studying law. I was working at a law firm, so I had to go, whatever it was, 6 in the morning, drive to work, which was 1 hour away from where I was living at the time. Work a full day, and then either go to training or go to university, whichever it was. Back then we were training 3 days a week and then playing a game on the weekend. So it was like a 7-day-a-week adventure. But for me, it was perfect because I was actually playing, and then so just the fact that I was able to play for Sydney United, my childhood club, was fantastic. And and then obviously as the first year Sydney United and law was like this, second year started creeping up, and then the fourth year I made my first appearance for Australia, and then it was like you could see that the football was going in that direction, which I was quite happy about. So maybe my father not so much. And then I made the jump overseas, and then that was it, And back then, I'm really showing my age now. Back then, there was no online study or anything like that, so I had to pretty much abandon the law.
Yeah. What took you over there? Obviously, you scored a lot of goals at Sydney United, but you got that move to, I don't know how you pronounce this, Arno, is it? Arno?
Arno, yeah.
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 So just tell us how that sort of came about, and then you moved to after that. Yeah,
so as I said, in the 4 years where everything was going, nice progression for me. It was just getting better and better. And then in the end, I was leading goal scorer in the fourth year in the competition. And Terry Venables was the new Socceroo coach. And before then, I was never a chance in any of the national teams. But Terry Venables came in, and he was looking at the league, and he said there was a 3-match series where we were playing only Australian-based players, so the overseas-based players weren't coming. So from the pool of players here, I was the leading goal scorer. So he straight away put me in that squad. And then from there, I played 3 international games. And that sort of then gave me a bit of an international appeal, I guess. And I was able to then start looking at overseas, or have an agent that was looking at overseas clubs. I had a couple of offers. And one of them was for Grasshopper Zurich to buy me an Aral, which was in the first division, to then play me. Sort of like on a loan basis, which was quite common back then. The other one was Feyenoord would buy me and then loan me out to their second division club. So we picked the first division. So I was playing in the highest league over there. That's why I picked Switzerland. And that was also after a discussion with Terry Venables. And then I went overseas. So then went to Switzerland. It was a tough year, more because of the whole homesick, and I just wasn't prepared for moving overseas and living overseas. I mean, they gave me apartment and car, but I had this apartment that I was Croatian, son of of somebody, my mum, who used to do everything for me. So I had to learn how to cook and clean and do all this stuff, and just life, in a different world on my own was just very tough to get used to, on top of the pressure of then having to perform at a much different level now. So that was tough the first year, and then sort of wanted to get out of Switzerland, and so that because of that whole experience, and then had a trial with Ralf Rangnick, who came in, and I went to a pre-season trial with them in Austria. They were doing a camp in Austria, and that just went when everything went smoothly. It was like just everything fit perfectly there. Then signed for and then they were in the second Bundesliga at the time, and then just an unbelievable year at and got promoted straight to the Bundesliga. So then I spent a couple of years in the Bundesliga, transferred over to Unterhaching when got relegated. And then after that went to England, Scotland, back to Germany, and then back to Sydney. So that was sort of the career.
As you said, you moved to England shortly after that, playing for Walsall with Steve Corica, among other people. Was that the first time you met Steve, or you obviously knew him through the national team?
No, we knew each other from a young age through the national team, and obviously then through Walsall, we were just
best mates, pretty much
inseparable anyway. And we were also in the national team was the same thing. So then it just became it was very easy living and playing in Walsall. It was very, very enjoyable that year there. In Birmingham was great living there, and that was the closest city to Walsall, so that's where I was living anyway. So it was a brilliant year, and obviously I would have liked to have stayed longer, but the whole work permit thing meant I had to keep applying every year for a work permit. So then every year the situation regarding how many Socceroo games you play changed. And the problem that we had is sometimes we play 1 or 2 Socceroo games in a year. It's not like now where they play many games. Sometimes you didn't play a game for a whole year or something. It was crazy. So how are you going to get a quota up when you're not even playing? And then if you miss one game, you're missing maybe 50% of the games in that year. So that was the problem there. So then, so the time with Bimby was excellent, and obviously then we linked up again at Sydney FC later on and spent 3 years there. So as players, so just interesting how life takes you in those kind of directions.
Yeah, but also was it the time when Paul Merson was player coach at that point, or was that
he came after? He came after. I think he waited till Bimby and I left, and then he decided to join.
But you did play with the current Belgian manager, didn't you, Roberto Martinez? There.
Yeah, we did. Right, he was actually a good friend. Still is a good friend of ours, and we were actually together quite a lot. And it was I think it was that foreigner culture kind of thing. It was great, and he always had a very sharp mind, and was always thinking about coaching. Anyway, Robbie, it's funny looking back and seeing how people used to speak about football while they were playing, and then for that evolution and the way it happened with Rob was unbelievable. And now, obviously, to be one of the best coaches in the world, just so good to see his progress. And it's been difficult to link up with him since this has all happened. But at one stage, I'd love to just see how he's going with his and be a part of, or at least get to see how he works. But that's something for the future.
And then after Walsall, obviously you moved to Aberdeen. Now I know you did score some very important goals at Aberdeen, including a winner at Parkhead at one stage in a cup tie, I think. Remember, or was it league?
No, that was a league game, but what made that one was that was a special one because at the time Celtic had gone 77 or 78 games unbeaten at home, and that was in all competitions. So they obviously had a lot of Champions League games. They were in Champions League every year, so they were having the Manchester Uniteds, Barcelonas, and all these guys coming to Parkhead, and they hadn't lost. So that was a massive run of games where they hadn't lost a game at home. And then comes Aberdeen, who weren't really having a great season. And then we beat them, and Martin O'Neill was the coach at the time. He was fuming because they'd actually just won the league, and then we came and then beat them to end this amazing home record, and I scored the winner there. So that's why even now I get a lot of tweets from from whenever they play each other. So it seems to be that memory that keeps popping up. So that was nice. What was it? Otherwise, maybe not the best year in total. I mean, we didn't finish too well, so that was sort of not. It was a nice sort of memory for that year.
Yeah. And then after you had a brief spell back in Germany, and then came home when the A-League was starting up. How did you sort of find out about that and get invited to come and play for Sydney FC?
So I was in Germany, and then basically there were a couple of agents that were contacting me about this new league that was starting up, and even while I was in Scotland, there were reporters who were asking, "Oh, what about this new A-League, this concept?" And I thought it was a great idea, and then. But I didn't. I was, probably my first thought was a little bit skeptical because we'd heard about a lot of things about Australian football and the way everything was going. So I never really thought too much about it. But then I got targeted and approached while I was in Germany. I just thought this was the time to go back. I just really felt that, and especially because I really believed that it was going to be something excellent. I wanted to be there at the start of it. So that was the thought behind it, and the first months of being involved with Sydney FC were unbelievable. It was really a great energy to being there and experiencing all that. On the field wasn't how I would like to have played and how I would have liked to have finished my career. A lot of injuries, a lot of problems with especially my back and my calves, and that was sort of something that just killed those 3 years for me. And then obviously the pressure of being a name that people wanted to play, expected more from. So that was a bit disappointing. But the whole experience of, especially going there the first year was unbelievable. And Dwight Yorke coming and all these experiences, even the 6 months leading into the first thing where we went overseas and played in what was a sort of like a Champions League tournament or Club World Cup, and all these experiences were unbelievable. And so good memories mixed in with some not so good memories, but then coming full circle and then coaching at Sydney FC. So still Sydney FC, a big part of a big bond there for me, and a great experience overall.
I was going to say, it couldn't have been that bad. I think we won the OFC at the very beginning when you first came there, and that put put the club into Club World Championships, which would have been a fantastic experience. And obviously, season one won the title and played alongside Dwight Yorke. As you say, there would have been some fantastic experiences, some fantastic stories with Dwight.
There were. I mean, it was unbelievable seeing a player of that caliber come here, and just the way that he approached the role. And by role, I mean, yes, he was a player, but everybody was like, the whole league was basically looking at Dwight at that time. And it was like amazing this guy was here. So the way that he was around the guys in the dressing room was fantastic. I mean, he just put himself on the level of the boys, and this is some guy that just had so much media attention, whether it was in football or his life outside of football. And we all know that, he was a star on and off the field. So just the way that he married that all together and made it seem seamless and brought all the guys along with him and made us all feel like, that he wasn't on a different level. I thought that was fantastic. And that made the year so enjoyable. And I guess from that part of it, you're right, it was unbelievable. But for me personally, because of the injuries, I mean, I was still a Socceroo, and we were leading into that 2006 World Cup. In 2005, I played my last game, against Indonesia in Perth, and scored a goal in that game. And then after that, because of injuries and not playing for Sydney FC, that was my last game. So it's that's where the career started to come to an end for me. So good times at the start, but then during that 3 years and really that realization that this is the end of my career and the injuries are not going to allow me to go any further. That was sort of the hard part. But from outside, the fans still expecting, well, this guy's, come back as a Socceroo, you expect more. So that's the understandable hard thing about coming back to Australia at the end of your career. That's probably the side of it where it can go either good way you finish on a high, or the way I finished, where basically finished with injuries.
You mentioned the Socceroos there, 30 caps for the Socceroos, plenty of goals as well. There's one highlight of scoring 9 in one game, which you never get the credit for, because Archie Thompson scored 13 in the same game. But is that still well, his is a world record. Is yours still the second biggest?
Yeah, it was 8. I scored 8. Archie scored 13. I scored 8. That's but look, that's a funny one to look at. I mean, it's not a we didn't want to be playing teams that obviously have a lot to do to build up their, they're on a different level. We're on a different level to big European teams, but a lot of those teams are on a different level to us. So we don't want to go into games and win by double-digit scores. But that's just what it was for us. And that game just sort of evolved into something that was, there were a lot of games where we were scoring, 9, 10, 11. So this wasn't any different until it was just sort of goal after goal after goal. So we didn't even realize what was happening until probably early in the second half, where it was like, oh, we're scoring a lot of goals here. So it's sort of not a memory where I think about, it's interesting, obviously, because you scored so many goals in a game, but you want to be remembering the goals in big games and the goals against, big teams or teams at the same level. So, yeah, but still, it's a good record to have 20 goals in 30 games. It's not a bad record, but behind it, there were some of those bigger score lines that help prop up the numbers.
Yeah. So what were your highlights of playing for the Socceroos?
Well, geez, I mean, for me, just we went to the Confederation Cup in Korea and Japan. What was that, 2002, I think it was? Yeah, that was 2001. That was fantastic. We got to the final there, played Japan and lost to Japan. We lost to Brazil. We lost to Japan in the semi-final, beat Brazil in the third playoff. So that was a big highlight, that tournament. That was great. But also for me, there was one game against Scotland, which was, I can't even remember the year now, but I was going through a tough time in Germany. I wasn't playing regularly, but I was still getting called up for the Socceroos, and playing time. I was pretty much playing all the time for the Socceroos, but not playing for my club, which was a funny situation. But the performances for the Socceroos were good. So Frank Farina kept including me and kept playing me. And this was a game where I wasn't playing for my team, Unterhaching in Germany in the Bundesliga. Went there to Scotland. Mark Viduka was supposed to play this game, but got injured before the game. So I played. I scored. We won 2-0. It was sort of a big game for us as well. Scotland at the time was a big name for us to be playing. Us playing in Scotland. So for us to then win 2-0 was a big one. For me to score was a big moment. And then also to go back to Germany and with that goal behind me was a big lift as well. So I really remember that one. That was a great experience for me. But generally, any camp that we went back and got together with the Socceroos was just such a great bonding experience. At that time, everybody was playing at big clubs around Europe or big leagues around Europe. So we were all coming back together with great experiences. And I just remember that in a very, very positive light.
Your broadcasting career, some big highlights there as well, I think.
Yeah, well, I mean, never really thought about broadcasting until the final years, like I mentioned, at Sydney FC, and then I sort of was doing interviews there, and a couple of people saying, "Oh, you're pretty good at this. Why don't you try doing some media after?" So then, sort of at the end of my Sydney FC career was when I was already thinking about doing media, doing coaching. What am I going to do after football? Which is not an easy thought even for guys now. That's why through the PFA and all of this, we're trying to help players think about career after football, because you never know what might happen. And that's what happened to me. It sort of hit me without all that thought. So I'm fortunate that I landed in a media career and coaching. But yeah, started at, I think the first one was Fox Sports News, just doing sort of like a few segments there. Worked a little bit at ESPN, then at Channel 10 where you were at the time, and that show World Football News, which was also a great experience and something totally new at the time for us here in Australia. So all these experiences, and then ended up at SBS and spent a long, long time at SBS and worked on 3 World Cups, went into hosting, which, as you would know better than most, it's not an easy thing to do, and it's a skill that really is a tough skill to learn, the whole reading the auto cue and being a host and leading and driving programs. That was something that was quite daunting, and that was a sort of jump in the deep end, get out of your comfort zone kind of moment, saying, okay, yeah, I can do the expert analyst, but to be a host as an ex-player is something not I think probably not something everybody can do, and I definitely didn't think I could do it. But I worked hard at it, and even though there were some really difficult moments and probably didn't look good at home on TV, that's for sure. But I tried to just push through that, and then had some great experiences hosting from the Sydney studio the Brazil World Cup, but then being on the sidelines in Russia and traveling around different cities, and then being in the studio with Foz and Lucy for the Russia World Cup was fantastic. I mean, that was such an experience. I loved being in Russia. I mean, it was not a country I thought about too much before. And it's just a great country, well organized, unbelievable tournament, and one of those experiences I'll never forget.